Welcome to the INRIX webinar, Parking Solutions for the Smart City. Today we will have two excellent presenters. First we'll hear from Alex Israel, our VP and General Manager of Parking for INRIX. And second, we'll hear from Rick Schumann, our Vice President and GM of our Public Sector Solutions Suite. Before we get started, I'd just like to go through a couple housekeeping items. Everyone is muted and will be throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, please submit them through the GoToWebinar question and answer tool to the right of the screen. We will answer all questions at the end of the presentation, and if we run out of time, we will answer your questions via email after the webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to it within 24 hours. It usually comes just tomorrow morning. So watch for that if you or your colleague happens to miss the webinar. And without further ado, I'll turn this over to Alex, and thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Allie. Really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Israel. I'm the, as Allie said, Vice President and General Manager of the Parking Division here at INRIX. Just by way of quick background, I joined INRIX about 6 months ago. Our company, ParkMe, was acquired by INRIX, which has now positioned us as the largest aggregator and distributor of parking information across the globe. So I'll get more into that, and if you guys have any questions at the end of the presentation, I'd be happy to answer them. So if we switch to the first slide, thank you, Mark. So I think, what I'd like to do here is guide us through the first section of this presentation as quickly as possible. Hopefully most of you know about INRIX, and if there are any explicit questions, you can ask those at the end. But I think the most important aspect of the first slide is if you look at INRIX as an organization, we've been around for about 11 years now, and historically we were founded around a motto which was driving intelligence. And really that nomenclature, that motto of driving intelligence was directly linked to automotive intelligence, automotive information. And as you've looked at INRIX has expanded its functionalities, and as the industry has expanded its functionalities, our goal is to bring movement intelligence to 5 different sectors: automotive innovation, smart city innovation, which we're going to touch on specifically within this presentation, efficient transportation systems, business analytics and intelligence, and then empowering consumers directly. So not only how can we bring this intelligence into the hands of businesses, but how can we get that intelligence into the hands of consumers where it can affect actual change in their behavior. Next slide, please. So, I kind of touched on this just now, but if you look at who is INRIX, we really are a connected service company driving movement intelligence. And simply, I don't like to read slides, but I think this is important to look at our mission. Our mission is to make it easier and safer and more enjoyable for people in motion by improving transportation worldwide. So whether that be municipalities, business intelligence, or consumers directly, our goal is to improve the intelligence and their decision process through the use of intelligent information. Next slide, please. So I think this is kind of touching on the same theme I just laid out, but we like to say we're working with the builders of the future to improve urban mobility, and specifically, I think that the paradigm we're touching on here is it's really about providing for a paradigm shift within devices and utilities people and industry use on a regular basis. It's not simply enough to provide this type of intelligence to a B2B application. We need to ensure that when we're providing this type of intelligence or this type of back-end infrastructure, that it actually provides actionable functionality to that organization or that individual, and that it gets into the hands of everyday people. When we founded ParkMe, we founded it on a simple paradigm to make parking easier for consumers. And it wasn't enough, or I'd actually basically say, we didn't really have any delusions of grandeur that everyone was going to have the INRIX traffic app or everyone was going to have the ParkMe app on their phone. Instead, we want to bring this functionality into devices and utilities that people and organizations are using on a daily basis. Mark, next slide. So this is a dense slide. I like to personally avoid dense slides, but as we look at this slide, this gives us an organizational overview of everything we do and the different industries, organizations, and utilities we touch. Everything from active road networks to sourcing data directly from users, and we provide this data directly to cars, directly to businesses, as well as municipalities. And you look at the overarching size of the industry today, or the size of the market that we're going to touch on from a municipal standpoint, and you look at the upper right-hand corner and you see that there are 28 megacities of 10 million people plus today, and 41 megacities expected with 10 million plus population by the end of 2030. This is just touching on the importance and focus of the public sector business today, and I know Rick is going to touch on that afterwards, but it's really the connection of personalized services to drivers and with the connection of the Internet of Things. And looking at, when I got into this business 6 years ago, the concept of IoT, Internet of Things, as well as the concept surrounding smart city initiatives were just starting. But really these initiatives are based on one, core drivers, which are the goals as dictated within the slide, but really surrounding intelligence and how do we drive and change behavior based on underlying intelligence that often is available based on the existing infrastructure within a municipality today. Next slide. So this is another dense slide, and we were actually discussing this slide before the presentation. I'm not going to touch on this in great detail, but the purpose of this slide, as I see it, is a fewfold. Is one, to show the people on the call the breadth of our customers, the breadth of the organizations that we work with across the globe. We have an excess of 400 customers that are utilizing our data on a regular basis to inform their decisions and inform their consumers. The two other points that I like to bring up, just with respect to this slide, I think it was a very important initiative when we implemented the I-95 Corridor Coalition for multi-state traffic monitoring, as well as close to my heart is the last bullet point on this slide. Following the acquisition, as I mentioned earlier, of ParkMe, INRIX had its own independent parking efforts, but following the acquisition, we became the largest aggregator and distributor of parking information worldwide. We like to say we're in 7 continents because we have one trailer tractor station in Antarctica parking. We have over 90,000 lots, 29 million parking spaces. We're in over 4,000 cities in over 64 countries. And really for us, it's about providing a paradigm shift within navigation and consumer behavior. No longer will a consumer be directed to the front door of their final destination, but they'll be directed to a parking lot or parking space associated with their final destination. And with that is not simply the finding of parking, but the payment of parking. How can you provide for a user experience where, independent of where the consumer is, whether they're in Helsinki, whether they're in Florida, or whether they're in Los Angeles, or whether they're in Duluth, allowing users to find and pay for parking through one ubiquitous consumer experience. Next slide, please. This is just another quick overview slide with respect to our history as INRIX, at INRIX. So we were founded in 2005, and clearly, once again, the most important bullet point on this slide with respect to me, because I'm egotistical, has to do with INRIX's acquisition of ParkMe, which is in 2015. But as I touched on before, we closed our first partners in our first few years as an organization with organizations like Ford. We also acquired a large traffic aggregator, one of our actually greatest competitors at the time in Europe, called ITIS Holdings. Close deals with BMW and Audi. We're now a tier 1 supplier to most of the largest automotive companies across the globe to ensure that we're bringing this functionality directly into the hands of consumers. Other interesting aspect as it relates to smart cities initiatives and parking information is with regards to the second to last bullet point, which is as of last year we closed a deal with BMW, which was a pioneering effort to bring on-street real-time availability to consumers. Once again, we'll talk about some statistics associated with parking that we're all familiar with, but that provides for an explicit paradigm shift within the industry, where we can provide real-time algorithmic insights into on-street occupancy information. Mark, next slide, please. So these are slides we're all way too familiar with for most of us that are in the parking industry. So I've been in the industry now for about 7 years, and the two facts or statistics that I like to say 99% of statistics are made up. But if you look at the two statistics on this slide that are repeated repetitively within the parking industry, you look at the upper left-hand quadrant, and it's 20 minutes is the average time spent looking for a parking spot, and the bottom right-hand quadrant, which says 30% of urban traffic is caused by drivers circling for parking. Really, whether or not we want to consider parking to be a problem or just something we're complacent with, the core goal is for a consumer to make parking an afterthought, to make it something that we don't have to think about. Parking, for the most part, is an afterthought in the sense that consumers don't go anywhere to park. They go somewhere to reach their final destination. Hopefully, we can keep parking as a sentiment of their user experience where it doesn't have to be a focus and it doesn't have to be a burden. And we can accomplish this through information and driving intelligence. Next slide, please. So this touches on kind of the same thematic elements for the last 9 slides, but really the importance here is the provisioning and providing of a seamless parking experience to our users, whether those users be businesses, municipalities, or consumers. The first step is to find parking, to tell a user, regardless of type, whether that be on-street, off-street, whether that be a garage, a surface lot, or a subterranean facility, where parking is available in real time, and then to be routed to that location in real time. Second is to compare prices, availability, compare price and availability. Really, the colloquialism we like to follow internally is that the world is divided up into cheapskates and lazy asses. And clearly that's a hypersimplification, and in fact it's a spectrum. But people in fact are either price sensitive or proximity sensitive. And it's within that dichotomy that we can provide users the utility and information they need to make an informed parking decision. And then thirdly, once they've found and compared parking, enable a user to pay for parking across a disparate series of parking providers through one ubiquitous payment solution independent of the underlying provider. Next slide, please. We touched on it, but what we like to say is, at INRIX, we provide the world of parking in a single API, whether that be off-street parking, on-street parking, or then the finding and paying of parking. I think we can go to the next slide. And with that, I'm going to hand this off to my colleague, Richmond. Rick?
Thanks, Alex. Sound check? How are we?
Sounds good to us, Rick.
Okay, great. First off, apologies if I have some sound difficulties. I'm in Miami today, and they're undergoing seriously inclement weather. So I end up in a location I hadn't planned to be while this call's going on. The show must go on. So if we get some background noise, apologies. I'm going to pick up the thread here from Alex, and as somebody that's been at INRIX for 10 of the 11 years, I've seen a lot of this evolution. And I just want to say, first off, thanks, Alex, and I hope you can all see, those of you that have worked with ParkMe before they became part of the INRIX family, Alex and his team, I hope you've enjoyed them. You know their energy and their enthusiasm. and it's been a great addition as we look to our customer base. And now, this presentation just kind of provides kind of how we bring all this together in supporting the public sector as it relates to parking. And so I'll pick up from here. And if you can go to the next slide, please. And then Alex will come back with all the great, kind of the background on some of the products as we have them and are creating them. So again, the vision is as Alex mentioned, the world in a single API. When we think about the parking context, it's complicated, right? There's lots of different elements in a region that make up parking. And even within specific agencies, there's different kinds of parking, but on-street parking, public, on-street, off-street, public, and private, airports, universities, ports, malls, free parking, zone parking, paid parking, things you can reserve, things you can't, etc. It's incredibly complex. And we see that there's an opportunity to move everybody forward along the pathway. We'll talk about a capability and maturity model here in a minute. Every agency, every region has a chance to move along the path. Some will move faster than others. Some start from a point that's ahead of others. But we see opportunities to help everybody, and then we also see some vision for kind of how, working with partners and with partner agencies, that we can really kind of, take it to the next level. So I'll describe that as well. Next. So when we think about use cases, and again, we could probably come up with so many different possible use cases that the slide could get even smaller. But fundamentally, we look at use cases as we see them today. They're kind of around getting better information for people who want to park. As Alex mentioned, there's a lot of inefficiency. We all know it. The numbers may change depending on the city, the time of day, and the location. But parking is an agitator in most of our lives, and a lot of that has to do with lack of information. And if you're from out of town, it tends to be hopeless. Then from the agency perspective, just getting a handle on the actual parking assets, where they're at, the pricing of those assets, of that parking, kind of the whole inventory thing. And what the ParkMe team has seen as they've aggregated is that, even within regions, certainly there's not an integrated view as you have multiple jurisdictions, but even within a particular city, there's on-street, off-street, just bringing that together in one place is a significant gap right now. Even agencies, in places where I live, the parking department focuses on the meters, but there's a lot of other parking and parking restrictions and rules and so forth that apply within the city. So there's a lot that can be done with improving kind of getting that handle on those assets. And then overall infrastructure planning. Parking is, as Alex mentioned, parking. Nobody lives to park. Parking's part of things, and that can be a better part of things. Can be tied better. Cities are coming up with their EV strategies. How does parking fit? Usually, you end up taking parking spaces or contemplating taking parking spaces for EVs. But where might we be able to create a better vision where maybe the non-EVs park and shuttles move people around cities in a better way, and just getting again a better handle on there are agencies that have variable price parking, and the ability to do that, monitor the impacts, etc. Lots of different use cases kind of in the overall kind of planning and analytics area. Next. Okay, as I mentioned, the capability maturity model view of the world. As we've engaged, as ParkMe and now INRIX with ParkMe is engaged cities, particularly, it's become obvious. A lot of times as a company, you say these are our products. and we serve these markets. As we look at the parking realm, we realize when we're focused on how we can help and assist public agencies, we realize that you might have products, and we'll talk more about those, but the reality is that there's a match and a fit for where a city is, its capabilities, its baseline, its focus, and kind of where it wants to go as far as where we can help. And so after several different meetings, we as a team we've kind of had an aha that there's these 12 areas that when we engage any city, we'd like to have kind of a dialogue with first. That's trying to get a sense and an understanding of either where you're at or your vision in these areas. And I'll hit these quickly to go through. But inventory. Do you even have the ability to collect information across? Do you have information, static information about your inventory? Where are your parking spots? Inventory management. The information around that, you have the ability to manage that information. Is it on paper? In a lot of places, there is no system. If you ask, how many parking spots you have, somebody might have an answer. You say where they're at, I don't know. And you might have parts of the network that, again, if they're not a meter, fundamentally treated totally differently. And is there ability to manage kind of the entire parking asset across a jurisdiction? Payment solutions, as Alex mentioned, many cities now are moving towards app-based payment for metered parking. Where are you as a city? Do you have a payment solution already in place? Somebody that you may work with or in the process of working with, or you may not have any solution, and that may be something that you're looking to implement. On-street equipment. Again, meters can vary from the old school meters to on-school, online, payment, credit card, mobile app, presence detection, you name it. Pay station or meter-based parking payment. Off-street equipment. What kind of if you're a city that has off-street lots that you manage, what kind of equipment, how sophisticated are you in the ability to keep up with information, your presence detection, et cetera. Planning, kind of just understanding how how parking and parking planning is done. You have a unified organization, or is there multiples? And is it a regional thing, or is there a single agency that kind of handles it across a city or a metropolitan area? The availability of information, what you already have in place or not, as it relates to sharing information with customers, users, static information, dynamic information, etc. Your engagement with developers. Do you have a culture that you're working? You want information. You want to expose an API out to other developers to kind of broaden your view. Get more people, more apps to leverage the available parking information. Pricing capabilities. Do you have simple pricing structures? Do you have complicated pricing structures? Do you have variable pricing, let's say, in lots or on street? Your geographic coverage and understanding the nature of the parking you have, where you might have meters. Do you have stickers or zones? Do you have areas that have parking limits that might be free to park, but you can only park for a certain amount of time? Parking enforcement, how sophisticated you are in enforcement, whether it's insourced, outsourced, and the like. And then connected car integration, the degree which you're already maybe engaged with folks that are connected, whether it's via payments or availability or just static information. So this is the kind of information. So kind of going forward, the folks that want to engage deep with us, we're going to be creating essentially a questionnaire, if you will, around this that will help us kind of get to a better and kind of get to the discussion of how we can help you based on where you're at along this continuum. So next, please. So we take that and we kind of think about it as a maturity model along the way. There's obviously lots of different locations along this continuum, but for ease of use, we've kind of bundled it into three areas. One is basic. Your city, a city that has relatively straightforward fixed parking rates. Things don't change a whole lot. You don't have an inventory that's necessarily up to date. Your meters aren't connected. You don't do much in the area of dynamic data. The parking planning is done ad hoc, political, call it what you will, and there's no connectivity as of now for consumers, whether that's information or payment or the like. Kind of moving up the chain, kind of the next bundle would be a city that's sophisticated, probably by today's standards, would be something along the lines of you're collecting, at least in some key parts of the city, you're collecting real-time availability data. You know your inventory. You collect. You make an effort to keep up on your inventory. Most meters, most lots are connected. You have some form of mobile payment. You have enforcement, and that enforcement is becoming integrated with the available information that you have. You're starting to think about how traffic and parking connect. More holistic planning. You're sharing information in some form, directly or indirectly, with your citizens and your users. And you may have your parking data available in an open data platform, so folks like us and ParkMe side of INRIX can take that data and provide it out to customers directly through the app or through our automotive customers, as Alex mentioned. And then there's a level of kind of the next tier where you take that, you build upon all that, and you start, the concept that we see of what smart cities will be doing related to parking is dynamic pricing around real time, understanding demand, managing demand. Everything's connected in some fashion, and as we'll talk, even not on-street parking where there are no meters. That's an asset that's may not be as much of a focus that we think in a smart city it can and should be. Mobile payment becomes the norm in a lot of ways to get there. And importantly, again, the concept from a consumer standpoint is this all starts to become seamless. Much like you move around regions now, I live in Florida and I pay tolls, and I move. There's several toll agencies in the state of Florida. I don't realize that I have one transponder and I'm getting all my tolls paid via that transponder, and the fact that it's complicated as I move through the network, which agencies and what fees and what equipment is behind the scenes making all that work. It's all consolidated, and our vision for kind of this smart city has that on-street, off-street, public, private, all being in a unified, be able to be paid for seamlessly, whether that's an app or a connected car, what have you. Planning across many departments, third-party developers getting access to information that again helps increase the adoption of payments, and reservations and more efficient use of the spaces. Enforcement is optimized. The ability to publish the rules, get people to play by the rules, and penalize those that don't in a cost-efficient way is something that a smart city will do consistently across its assets. And parking information efficiently shared with auto OEMs and citizens. So we kind of see that as the continuum. If we go to the next slide, I'm starting to transition a bit to the end of my material, as we think about it from an INRIX standpoint, how we can help along this pathway. We look kind of at that basic level. Where we can help people move is kind of increasing overall situational awareness. So as we work with cities who say, well, I don't really have a lot, there are some steps we can take. We can start exchanging data. We can actually start integrating data that you have, that helps us create an inventory that we can share back with you. Information related about pricing and restrictions and hours and all those sorts of things. And so basically an engagement model many times is a barter model where you give us information, we can give you some back that helps you become more effective at the same time, helps us run our business that gives better information to your users, and everybody wins. As we move along kind of on the sophisticated pathway, we start looking at kind of we start integrating the system. And kind of underneath all of this is kind of an operator platform or dashboard that can help, you start, maybe you or, folks that work for you can help online keep up with inventory and maintain that inventory. We give you the tools to do that, and that helps everybody. The white labels, we have customers that we've white labeled the ParkMe app for those customers, or we can white label parts of the app into apps that may already exist within the city, including payments. Real-time information availability, whether that's website, whether that's mobile app, whether that's direct to drivers. These are areas that we can help and assist the city. Basically, and we'll touch on this here in a minute, but the ability because we tie and touch with a lot of different ecosystem partners, whether they're sensor folks detecting presence or managing ingress or egress, gates, payments, all the like. We can actually work with the city to help create a model that helps you better detect things, things that may not be our direct experience, but we can work with others to help bring that into being. And then as we look kind of, again, further along the continuum, we build on top of that the concept of analytics for parking. We've been doing roadway analytics for several years now, optimizing parking enforcement. We have some tools and some ideas for tools in this area based upon the assets that we have. Correlation with other data sets, how traffic, again, think about if you're thinking about analytics, that famous 30% number, you start messing around with parking rules, pricing, availability. Can we affect that 30% number of people searching for parking? How long do people actually search for parking? How much circling goes on that can be reduced? So combining these data sets, both to create, to make decisions, and then also monitor the impact of those decisions. Parking reservation is another area that we see kind of moving in, the ability to kind of match that supply and demand and bring reservations in as well. Obviously, EV reservations is an important part of any kind of EV strategy that a city might have. As I mentioned, the kind of the deep integration with ecosystem partners. Next, please. And Alex will talk more about kind of specific products, the APIs, etc. I've got a couple slides, and I'll hand it back to Alex. And wanted to bring forward a concept. So some of you on the call may be involved in one of the 7 cities that are in the Smart City, the U.S. Smart City Challenge finalists. Parking obviously is a key element of smart cities. But if you're not in the 7, we're actually, kind of just be blunt here, we're actually in the market right now for an 8th city. As we put all this together, we see that there's a great opportunity to kind of go deep in advancing parking. Bringing all this together, as we described, kind of moving from wherever you happen to be in that model, jumping to the next generation. And we're using the term Parking 2020 to kind of reflect it is it's not, parking next month, but it's not parking utopia that's in 2050 type thing out there in a future that's too far to realize. We're talking about here is a concerted effort to bring all these different tools, systems, ecosystems together to make everybody more intelligent, the agencies, the consumers, the lot operators, businesses, planners, etc. Make us all more intelligent, get information into the car, make the opportunities to make things more equitable. Again, getting information. Maybe there's ways you create innovative pricing programs for those that you have accessibility concerns and the like. Making your city more green, environmentally friendly. Reducing the impacts of people searching for parking. Maybe altering how people park in significant ways. Better integrated with other modes of transport, as we've mentioned, and just generally making things more efficient. Applying Freakonomics principles, behavioral economics principles to parking. And so we're engaged with the 7 cities, but we see there's some funding opportunities in the very near term that we would like to, if there's an 8th city out there, any of you on a call say, yeah, this sounds very interesting to me. Again, we are the largest aggregator of data. We have the largest ecosystem of partners that you may already have folks that you work with, that smart meters, pay stations, payment providers. There's a good chance we're already working with them and can integrate that data. And we'd love to work with you and talk with you about how we can bring this, a Parking 2020 to reality. And my final slide here in this section is about, again, one of the things we know working with folks is that most of the parts of transportation, public sector that we work with are complicated, and we get that. And parking is at least as complicated as most of the other parts of the world that we work with. You've got lot operators. You look at a city. You have a lot in a building. There's somebody who manages that lot. And while it's often very decentralized and disaggregated, there are large national players. There are equipment makers. Again, whether that's on-street, off-street, payment, sensing, enforcement, violations, etc. We work with many of those. And obviously, we have city partners. Here's a list of some of the cities that, the icons of some of the cities that we work with to provide solutions today, whether that's a mobile app, widgets, websites, etc. And I also wanted to point out, as an example, kind of the innovations going on. We announced, along with GE, or Current, which is a GE company, announced, I believe it was about 10 days ago now, a collaboration where Current fundamentally is as smart streetlights, and those streetlights can also be used as detectors, and we see obvious uses with those streetlights for presence detection, and in particular, we think about areas that are not metered, but are still important, whether it's zones and sticker and zone parking, whether it's duration free parking for a certain amount of time, those types of things. And so we're very excited about the ability to work with GE, who Current, that they have a lot of the same kind of cloud-based, API-based views of the world that fits very well with kind of our vision. And there are obviously other benefits as well that those smart streetlights can bring in, but the focus here in this presentation will be as it relates to parking. So just an example of the ecosystem partners that we can bring to play. So imagine, we work with Current, and we can take a section of the city and immediately get occupancy information where it's not been available before. So with that, I think that kind of ends my part of this the presentation. I'll come back and kind of moderate questions, but I'm going to hand it over to Alex, who will kind of walk through the parking, some of the products we have and the APIs as kind of a quick overview.
Great, thanks, Rick. Really appreciate you handing it back over to me. Why don't we go on to the next slide? Great. This is a very detailed slide, but more than anything, this slide's utilized to illustrate both the aggregation, depth, and coverage of the data that we work with municipalities to surface to consumers or to businesses. So you look at the Google Maps image on the left, which is actually a Google Maps image of downtown Santa Monica, which is an area close to my heart because we're based in downtown Santa Monica, and you'll see the manifestation of actually just the off-street infrastructure that we aggregate in a given city. You'll see that the dots represent specific parking locations, whether they be surface lots, subterranean lots, or structures. Those are the rates associated with those given facilities. And we gather up to, I believe it's 92 attributes per facility. You'll notice the blue lots are actually facilities that you can reserve in advance. And this is just, once again, to show the breadth of the data that we aggregate. And this is just the off-street infrastructure. If you actually were to click on either the dev zone on INRIX or the ParkMe website, you'd be able to see a greater level of granularity to view or be illustrated on-street real-time availability. We can go to the next slide, please. So, you know, to further illustrate some of Rick's points earlier, one of the products that we provide to municipalities when we work with municipalities is white labeled app functionality. We've spent effectively millions of dollars building out a robust tool to allow consumers to find and pay for parking in a given municipality. We can work with municipalities to bring that functionality to the municipality to enable their consumers to have, for example, a Miami Beach parking app powered by ParkMe and INRIX. So it's a fully branded, customizable parking application which has all the core functionality and all the core features that are available on the ParkMe application now in a branded or white labeled municipal focused application. And that's available both on iOS, Android, and Windows. We don't say Windows on here because no one uses Windows phones, but iOS and Android. And then, of course, you know, one of the optional functionalities that we can include is the INRIX Auto Intelligent SDK. Which both one provides additional functionality that we can discuss later in this presentation, but also allows us to source information directly from the consumption and use of this application, so we can provide a more customizable experience to the end user based on their historical driving patterns. So, for example, if we know that a consumer prefers surface lots, we can direct them to surface lots. Or if we know a consumer prefers cheaper lots as juxtaposed to that of lots with closer proximity to their final destination, we can choose to feature those specific functionality, those specific locations. We can go to the next slide. You know, one of the last things I'd actually just touch on the previous slide, and we don't have to go back, but within that white label functionality, not only do we provide the base level intelligence associated with finding parking, we also then, as I described earlier in the presentation, provide the functionality to enable a user to pay for parking across the disparate payment providers in a given region. And Miami Beach is a perfect example, as they have different on-street payment providers and they also have different off-street payment providers. So we can provide for a ubiquitous experience across those disparate payment solutions. So within and you'll see the example here on this slide with regards to Coral Gables. But not only do we provide a white-labeled functionality for our applications, we also provide a white-labeled widget or a parking map that a municipality or enterprise can bring and present on their existing website, integrated into their design elements to allow users to find and pay for parking via their website. And that works ubiquitously across the primary browsers, the most popular browsers across the globe. And, you know, one of the other tools that I'm most most passionate about and proud of that we've developed is what we call our rate calculator. And that takes the rate cards, the complex rate cards, whether they be on-street or off-street, and turns that rate information into data and allows a user to go into the system and say, I'm going to go and park for 2 hours starting at this time, and we can tell them the exact rates and hours of operation according to their preference. And as I mentioned earlier, we allow users to also pay for parking. And lastly, on this slide, you'll see a mention to algorithms. So, as I mentioned earlier, we utilize an algorithmic back end to tell a user where they're going to have the highest likelihood of finding available parking on street. So we take in externalities, everything from real-time traffic information, real-time transaction information, real-time parking violation information, real-time event feeds, and real-time weather feeds to tell a user in real time where they're going to have the highest likelihood of finding available parking on street. Next slide. So this is exactly, that was the perfect transition. I might have got a little ahead of myself there. But you can see on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen the digital graphic that shows on-street, INRIX on-street parking. This is a real-time graphical utilization of our on-street data, showing that the dynamicy of real-time on-street information and how we can take these externalities and we can build an algorithmic system that can tell a user with a high degree of accuracy where they're going to have the highest likelihood of finding available parking. And one of the interesting aspects of these quote-unquote heat maps is the association or facility surrounding probability. And the reason I'm going to focus on this for a minute is if you look at 2 blocks, and the use case I like to think about is 1 block in front of a law firm and 1 block in front of a supermarket. While both blocks may be full, there's 2 aspects here. 1, we're not going to tell a user with a good degree of granularity where 1 space is available, because by the time you get there, that space is going to be perished. Or we're going to facilitate a fight because we're going to drive 2 people to the same location. The second aspect is if we take 2 blocks, the one in front of the law firm and one in front of a supermarket, and if they're both full, that doesn't provide a lot of utility to the user. So instead, we provide relative probability based on turnover. If we know that the average turnover in front of the supermarket is 15 minutes, while the average turnover in front of the law firm is 2 hours, while both blocks become full, we know that it's better from a utility standpoint to direct the consumer to look for parking in front of the supermarket as juxtaposed to that of in front of the law firm. I think we can go to next slide. And of course, we integrate, I think just the last point on this slide, that previous slide, and on this slide, is we integrate with all of the largest meter and sensor manufacturers across the globe to bring the existing infrastructure of a municipality into this system. So we're not asking or purporting to ask a municipality to deploy new infrastructure. In fact, we're utilizing the existing infrastructure of the municipality. Also, we have, similarly but less algorithmic based, we have off-street real-time occupancy information. And this real-time occupancy information streams directly from the infrastructure in place at a given location, such as inductive loops in the ground, park systems, which are, for those of you that are not parking nerds like myself, parking access revenue control systems, as well as we've facilitated relationships with a lot of the largest parking operators across the globe, whereby their attendants in the field are actually providing us real-time occupancy information. We can go to the next slide. So, I think this is kind of an important transition. While INRIX and ParkMe are very hyper-focused on providing utility to the end user, we also provide specific utility to parking operators from an operator dashboard standpoint. So how do we provide insights and analytics into the solutions and systems that are being deployed based on the existing infrastructure within a municipality. And we provide what we qualify as our operator dashboard. And our operator dashboard and attendant applications provide the functionality and utility to the operator to update and maintain their own information in real time, whether that be rate information, occupancy information, or hours of operation. Users can go into the system, update parking information manually, change occupancy, and access direct reporting infrastructure. Next slide. So this is a new solution for us. To an extent, we have worked very closely with organizations like Xerox and the Los Angeles Department of Transportation with their program called LA Express Park. To what we've found as a base paradigm is in the industry is municipalities, from a smart city initiative perspective, are undertaking a paradigm shift or a desire to provide real-time demand-based pricing to consumers to affect consumer behavior from a simple supply and demand curve model whereby they can actually ensure that spaces are available by changing the pricing information of meters on the street. Unfortunately, the problem associated with this model is not, can I change the prices, but can I change the consumer behavior? And in order to change consumer behavior, you have to provide this information in advance through devices consumers are already using to actually affect behavior. So we've worked very closely with organizations like Xerox and LA DOT within the LA Express Park program to not only aggregate the data from the city, but when the city or municipality is making a policy change, how can we provide this information or this utility to consumers in real time to actually affect behavior? It's wonderful that we have a sign out front of a parking facility saying that the parking facility is 50% full, but how do we get that information in the hands of users in devices they are already using, either on their mobile phone, in their cars, or online before they make the decision? So we're driving consumers to the correct parking locations, and we're driving consumers to the correct business district that they may not be going to otherwise because they would be concerned with parking. Next slide, please. So this is, you have to excuse me, this is a little bit repetitive to the previous slide talking about our operator dashboard. But as we move into the future, we're seeing a greater demand and dependency for insights and analytics surrounding parking. So how can we provide this base level infrastructure back to municipalities, back through our operator dashboard, to enable city managers to have access to, as we say on the slide, robust data visualizations, historical reporting, and predictive trends? How can we show a user what's happening, and a user in this case being a municipality or an operator, what is happening in their municipality from a parking perspective in real time? And I think the final component here is municipalities historically have spent a significant amount of resources gathering historical data associated with parking either on an annually, semi-annually, or every few year basis. And what this infrastructure does is it takes the existing base infrastructure of a municipality and exposes that data to the decision makers in real time. So they don't have to continually survey. They can see the actual conditions of a municipality in real time as they happen or as they unfold in front of them. Next slide. So this is a new infrastructure and deployment for INRIX, but what we're looking at is a product that we're calling ParkMe's Enforcement Optimizer. This is a workforce management application that is helping enforcement officers optimize both routing and to ensure that they are effectively enforcing based on what is unfortunately a historical low level of enforcement optimization. Statistics anywhere from 2 to 20% of scofflaw violators are actually acquired or attained. What we're doing is we're providing an underlying infrastructure to increase that accuracy based on the information that we're streaming from externalities as well as real-time meters on an effective real-time basis. Next slide. So we talked about this a little earlier, but I guess this is a summary slide to an extent. This slide really shows, of course we're at the center of this slide, but I don't necessarily think that's a fair assertion. Truly, what we do like to say is we're providing the world of parking in a single API, but what we're doing is we're working with many providers that are providing significant utility to their specific customers, and we're integrating them under one umbrella. We're combining off-street static parking information with on-street static information. We're making that information actionable through real-time intelligence, and then we're combining that information with payment solutions both on and off street to provide for one ubiquitous payment solution to consumers. I think we can go to the next slide. I think that the last comment that's important is not only are we providing that functionality on one umbrella, we're then providing that functionality back to developers to allow them, whether they be automotive companies or municipalities or specific mobile or enterprise internet platforms, we're providing that functionality in real time so that they can provide that functionality through devices that consumers are already using. We really touched on this earlier, but as we look at off-street parking, we discussed 88 attributes in 90,000 garages across the globe. This is really about providing comprehensive coverage. When we got into this industry, we got into parking, it was really about providing coverage. It was really about breadth of coverage. And now, as the industry has evolved, this has been about depth of coverage and accuracy of coverage. So we have to be truly comprehensive. In order to do this, we're constantly building out and evaluating our algorithmic models, as well as utilizing third-party firms to evaluate our data, our underlying accuracy. We actually we collaborated with one of the industry standard consulting firms to evaluate our data from an independent standpoint as of last year, and in December they released a study that, and I quote, said INRIX is the leader and INRIX is off-street parking's clear winner, which really showed our focus and underlying commitment to data quality. And along with that commitment comes exclusive sourcing deals from the parking industry. So how can we work with the parking industry to not only ensure that the underlying infrastructure that being provided to us is accurate, but also that underlying infrastructure is being provided to us exclusively so we can be the sole source of that infrastructure or that information back to the market. And I think when this slide was created, the core focus is not simply can we put dots on a map, but can we put the underlying quality that provides utility to end users. As we move to the next slide, you can see that kind of the gross change in how coverage and quality is consistently growing across the globe. And clearly our focus historically has been North America and Europe, but we've rapidly expanded into Asia as well as South America. Next slide. So we talked about this a little, but from an off-street perspective, we divide the data into static data as well as dynamic data. Dynamic data, this actually says 15 minutes, but that's an error. That data can stream to us in relative real time, and then we can provide that to our customers normally within 5 minutes. And then from static data set, as we said, 88 attributes, everything from hours of operation to polygons outlining the exterior edges of a specific parking facility, as well as entrance points. And I'd say that one of the most important aspects of our data set is an entrance point. A garage does not exist without an entrance point, and that's a paradigm associated with directing the consumer not simply to an address associated with their final destination or an address associated with the parking lot, but an entrance point, the longitude and latitude of the entrance point, which becomes fundamentally critical because the address associated with that parking lot is often in a very different location than the actual entrance point. Next slide. And we touched on this paradigm earlier, but we talked about BMW, we talked about our on-street infrastructure, real-time block-by-block availability, static data, as well as availability and rates. And the core functionality is this is effectively a mutable platform that we can provide this base underlying data across existing infrastructure that a municipality has in place or an OEM has in place. And you'll see an example of real-time occupancy with BMW on this slide. And right now, coverage for on-street exists in 30 markets, and we're expecting that coverage to be in excess of 60 markets by the end of 2017. Next slide, please. So I think we can actually move past this slide because it's a little bit redundant to the previous conversations, but this effectively illustrates how we aggregate the existing data within a given municipality as well as probe data sourcing from mobile phones and cars to build out an algorithmic model for real-time on-street occupancy and then provide it to devices people are using on a daily basis, whether they be their mobile phone, web applications, or navigation systems embedded or as an aftermarket solution within automotive products. Next slide. So, this is again another level of granularity, expressing both our static data and dynamic data associated with parking on street, whether that be GPS coordinates, street name, GPS coordinates of meter locations, as well as dynamic availability. And once again, not on the space level granularity, but on the block level. We can go next slide. I think that brings us to a conclusion. Sorry to rush through those final slides, but I think there was a lot of redundancy there, if I don't say so myself, from previous descriptions and this conversation. So I think lastly, we'd love to continue for you to join us on this journey. And we're going to be at the International Parking Institute Parking Conference in Nashville from May 17th through May 20th at booth 2,117. Well, there are not 2,000 booths, but that is our number. We'd love you to join us. We'll be having a great time at Nashville, but we'll also be pushing the industry forward. So if there's anything we can do to help, myself, Alex, Israel will be available, as well as a lot of the rest of the INRIX and ParkMe teams. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So now we will stay on for as long as we need to, up till 3 o'clock Eastern, noon Pacific, to address questions. I'm going to moderate and kick the hard questions to Alex. So we have a few already seated. The first one actually is one from me. Could you elaborate a little bit on the ecosystem partners that you had to bring on board to implement I-95 Corridor Coalition successfully? So that was a traffic data project. We essentially, a lot of the underlying work we did there, we did ourselves. After, the ecosystem there is gathering anonymous GPS data, something that we were the first in the industry to do, to be able to create real-time traffic, first in the U.S. to do. And so most of the services we deliver for that project, they're actually, once we gather that data, we've delivered most of it ourselves. Now, what I will say is that the project itself has created an ecosystem around it, which is something I think that we could think about here too, is as we've been able to provide real-time traffic and to say the state of Virginia as an example, we've been providing them statewide data for several years. They have created, their consultants, their integrators leverage that data for real-time applications, for analysis applications, and the like. And so an ecosystem is kind of built up around a couple of APIs that focus on real-time traffic. So next question, Alex, that could be for you, or we can try to tag team together. And if anyone else from INRIX on the line has the question is, any automakers who have embedded INRIX-supported features for cars in emerging or highly congested markets? question mark.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question, Rick? It broke up there for a second.
Okay, I can repeat the question. Any automakers? Are there any automakers who may have embedded INRIX-supported features for cars in emerging or highly congested markets?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. It's probably a best question positioned for Mark Pendergast. I don't know if Mark is on the phone or can still answer specifically with OEM customers that,
Sure.
you know, have.
Hey, Alex. I've been in the background, everyone. This is Mark Pendergast, Product Manager for Parking for INRIX. I've been dutifully going through the slides at the same time, but when questions arrive, I can jump in too. And that is indeed an excellent question. At this current time, we have a number of OEMs that have deployed our solutions, Audi, Daimler being among them, Toyota. To my knowledge, none of them have deployed these in emerging markets, in developing markets, if you will. So the concentration of our OEM customer base has been in the North American and European markets only. I know we've gotten quite a few inquiries into emerging markets, like Latin America and Asia, but to date, as far as I know, I don't believe any of our OEM customers are deploying in those markets. We hope to see that soon, though.
Mark, highly congested markets. We have some customers in Moscow. Do we know about highly congested?
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be a good. I mean, obviously there are many cities in the developed world: London, Paris, Munich, New York, L.A., Washington D.C. Very congested environment, and many of our customers are in fact using our services in those markets for sure. It depends, of course, on how you define emerging markets for the question. Hopefully that answers that. But certainly our services are indeed being used in very congested markets, metropolitan markets across the world.
Okay, thanks. Next question is, how many, and Alex, I'm interested in your view as somebody that's lived parking worldwide for longer than most of us. How many U.S. global cities have attained level 3 maturity in citywide smart parking deployments?
Rick, do you want to bring up, or Mark, can you go to the slide that just so we're all talking about the same thing and everyone listening in can see what we're referring to when we talk about a level 3 deployment?
Something around slide 18 or so, Mark. 18, 19, something like that. $15.
Great, thanks, Mark. So I would actually argue, Mark, you can correct me if you disagree, but there are a number of cities that have reached the level 2, which would be sophisticated stage. From a smart city parking deployment, I would say that the number of cities in the global cities right now that are in smart parking level 3 would be less than 10, and that's probably also the high adoption of mobile payment, which is a threshold that prevents a lot of municipalities, even if they've deployed smart parking solutions, have not reached that level 3 because they have not adopted the level of smart parking payment solutions to reach that threshold.
Okay, great, thanks. The next question, and Mark, we may need to draw you in on this one as well. Do streetlights provided detect? So we're talking about the current GE streetlights. Do streetlights provided detect even with the presence of vegetation and/or ice, snow?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rick. I'm going to defer that to our friends at GE. I do not know the answer to that. I know that their sophisticated lights do detect people moving, vehicles moving, coming and going. I do not believe I've seen any scenarios where they detect weather or vegetation. So that would be a great question for the GE current.
Sorry, Mark, I may have broke up. It's, do they detect in the presence of vegetation or ice and snow? Do they work when the weather's bad? Do they work in and around trees?
Yeah, exactly. Good question. Yes, they do. Where there is a relatively good field of view, they do detect. Again, a lot of this technology is very sophisticated camera work, but I know that they have tested this in all environments, both with trees, without, as well as under every sort of weather condition as well. So a very good question. If people are interested in learning more, I'd be happy to help direct them to the team at GE Current to answer these questions in more detail.
Great. Okay. Next question: can more detail be provided, Alex, for the enforcement and violation monitoring? It wasn't clear what elements are considered and how. Thank you. That might have been asked before you got to the enforcement slide, so maybe we've touched on this.
Yeah, no, you know what? I think we did probably touch on that, but the question came in from Peter Richards, and Peter, I would be happy. I think given the nuance and detail surrounding enforcement violation monitoring, I'd be happy to take that conversation offline. I can be reached at alex@parkme.com, or we can set up a call, and I'd be happy to give you more details surrounding enforcement and violation monitoring.
Or come see us in Nashville.
Yes, come see us in Nashville, exactly.
Right. Okay, this is a good question here. What do you see in the future with self-driving cars that need not park where the passenger exits? We're all going to jump in at once.
Want me to take that one, Rick?
Yeah, give your view. I can give mine, but I think you've been more focused on the space. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys for the question. Personally, I am a futurist. So there are a lot of questions surrounding what happens through autonomous driving, and what is the manifestation on autonomous driving within the parking industry. I would argue that we are, for the near future, even in the not so near future, going to find that cars, whether autonomous or self-driving, are going to need to find places to park, even after they drop off consumers. Even in a sharing economy, often cars will need to find a place to either charge or stop, as to not waste energy. So I think there's going to be significant demand as we move into the future for parking.
Okay, next question. What are the different methods you use to determine real-time space occupancy for on-street and off-street parking? Again, we may have covered this in the more detailed section, but a chance to reiterate.
Yeah. So different methods to use to determine real-time space occupancy for on and off-street. So off-street is normally either based on real-time counts coming from a parking operator themselves, so an attendant updating occupancy information, or it can come from API-level integrations with park systems or back-end POS systems that have counts given on a given lot, and we stream that information in real time to our back-end. And there can be algorithmic occupancy for off-street parking as well. And then for on-street parking, based on historical norms, and on-street parking, we look at historical transactions, real-time transactions, real-time enforcement feeds, as well as weather and event feeds to provide algorithmic real-time occupancy information on street to allow user to, from a probability model, where they're going to have the highest likelihood of finding available parking in real time.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Next question. I'm a consultant that works with municipalities and private sector clients on various studies, parking utilization technologies, et cetera, and one of the challenges in the transition phase from legacy systems, i.e. dumb parking, to the INRIX type solutions, Municipalities are always concerned that they have to accommodate all of the public, not just those with smartphones and are tech savvy. Any suggestions on best addressing this transition?
You want me to take this one, Rick?
Yeah, yes, please.
So look, this is a historical problem and something we're very familiar with. I think it's a very similar problem associated. How does a municipality deal with the necessity to raise rates for on-street parking as well, considering that is going to be a very unpopular, non-popular decision? I would actually argue that my non-sensitive solution would say we need to bite the bullet. These municipalities need to bite the bullet. I'm not going to argue for a full deployment for on-street payment with a mobile device as long as there's not a solution, whether that be meters or some form of payment in from local vendors. I think there are intermediate steps. I think this is part of a larger conversation. I'm not sure if the gentleman from Canada is going to be at IPI, but I'd be happy to talk further about this. I think there are solutions that the market can deploy to, in fact, take advantage of or ensure that they do not disenfranchise certain constituencies.
Alex, this is Mark. I'll just jump in here too, because this is, I think, a very important question and something that's obviously all cities are grappling with. We should also look beyond just payments as well. Payments obviously is a more complicated thing because it involves money and access to different types of tools. But we shouldn't forget that one of the key benefits that INRIX provides to municipalities is access to information. And information on availability in particular, on street, off street, that kind of information can be disseminated not just through mobile smartphones and websites, but they could also be disseminated through very visible signs within a downtown infrastructure. Many cities are moving down that path already. Here in Seattle, as you enter the city from a number of different large avenues, you can see very, very visible, updated, dynamic signs pointing you to where you have availability and off-street lots. That kind of sign is available to everybody, whether you have a smartphone or not. And I think that's the kind of integrated solution that a city has to look at is how do I take advantage of this information and distribute it in as many different channels as possible. And that doesn't just have to be a smartphone. It could be a sign, like I said. It could be over the radio. It could be over television, for example. It could be through any number of means, even billboards on the side of roads, for example. This kind of solution obviously is what we would pitch as a true smart city that makes that information equitable and available to everybody. I'll acknowledge, though, that the payment side of things is a little bit more complicated, especially as we move towards mobile payments. But I do think in the long run, the mobile payments will become a de facto standard across many cities. So hopefully that addresses that question.
Yeah, and I would just which I think it did. The response back was a good answer from the current speaker. You think about things. I mean, first off, obviously, every step of this way, each step has to justify itself, right? It has to be, you may not touch 100% people, but if you can be cost effective, the investment's going to pay for itself. That's helpful along the path. But things like, an example though, underserved aren't always technologically left behind. I mean, you think about how food stamps and stuff now is all done via cards. So you have a concept, throw it out there. Maybe some cities do this, maybe they don't. But why? Maybe there's accessibility. You move the smart meters. Maybe you have an underserved group that has the ability to use their EBT cards in some fashion to get discounted parking or free parking for as part of a job training or transition to jobs or so forth. So I think there be opportunities along this path. I think to look at. It's a great question. We can't forget that not everybody is young and energetic like Alex, and mobile, and lives with the world on their phone, how do we serve everybody? Okay, let's see. We have one more question, and this comes from Doug Newcomb, who, those of you know, he works for the C3 Group, very insightful market journalist, reporter, observer. He says, how much does INRIX work with cities and incorporate their data into parking solutions? So Alex or Mark, you want to give an example, or maybe Mark, an example of what we're doing with some of the cities for the kind of the off-street parking that we're moving, that we're building, growing out city by city.
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in, and I know Alex won't bite his tongue either. So on the on-street side, we've actually worked with a number of cities collaborating on using their data into our on-street parking solutions. I'll call out two examples on the West Coast that have been particularly helpful and willing to share. I would say they're very far along that maturity model in terms of engaging with outside developers like INRIX. Seattle and San Francisco in particular. San Francisco, I think, led the way in creating an open data platform and sharing all sorts of really rich parking data with third parties. They're really at the heart of Silicon Valley there, so I think they have that mindset already. And they also leveraged a lot of federal funds from back in 2011, I believe, to develop that open data platform and do very interesting things in the parking space. So they have been particularly helpful in sharing that data with us. Right home here in Seattle, we also have a great relationship with the local parking authorities. They too have been very helpful in sharing us information like sign databases, transaction histories, locations of restrictions, for example, as well as meters. And that kind of information is extremely useful for helping us build an occupancy model and in sharing that information then back with the cities so they can see what they can do with that data. I probably have a couple other examples in mind, but maybe Alex, you want to chime in on some of the cities that you've been working with in the past too.
No, I think, Mark, you really touched on it. I think this is a very important question, Doug. Thank you for asking. We very clearly do not deploy these solutions in a silo or without the aid and help of the existing infrastructure as provided by municipalities. So we work very closely with cities like Santa Monica, cities like Austin, cities like Seattle, as Mark mentioned, to ensure that we're bringing that data based on the existing infrastructure to consumers in real time. But it's absolutely a collaboration between municipalities and INRIX to bring this data to consumers on devices they're already using. Okay,
I see no more questions in the chat box. So as we're kind of getting near the end of our appointed time, I'm going to turn it over to Rose, I believe, some final comments. So Alex, thank you. Mark, thank you for jumping in. Appreciate the assistance, and obviously thanks for building great products. So Rose, Allie, we'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. This is Allie. And I would just like to send out a special thank you to all of our attendees today for joining us. And again, a special thanks to Alex and Rick for your expertise on parking solutions to build smarter cities. Also, Mark, thanks for jumping in. we always depend on your expertise as well, so thank you so much. Again, just to all of our attendees, the session has been recorded, and we will send it out to everyone that's joined, and even those that registered that couldn't join us today. So if you have colleagues or anyone that couldn't make it today, everyone will receive the recording in an automated email that you'll receive tomorrow. And we will also make the recording available on our public sector and product web pages on INRIX.com. In the meantime, we thank you again and invite you to visit our website at INRIX.com and find more resources. And you can always reach out to anyone on our team by contacting BizDev, that's BUSDEV, at INRIX.com with any immediate questions you may have in the meantime. I think that's a wrap. Thanks again all for joining today. Bye-bye.